Hi, Alan Stratton from As Wood Turns. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we have been socially distanced. We've been so socially distanced that we can't have demonstrations of wood turning in our local clubs. So last week I had an interactive remote demonstration via the internet for some of my subscribers. And we turned a sphere with some additional groovy decorations. It was a learning experience. We had a couple of glitches. We worked them through. One glitch is that the video didn't get recorded, so for this one I'm having to redo it. But if you would like to participate in future interactive remote demonstrations via the internet, please let me know on my website, which is aswoodturns.com. With YouTube regulations, I can't let you know. So you have to go to aswoodturns.com. I'll put more details down below this video. And register on there and subscribe on there so that I can invite you to future demonstrations. But meanwhile, let's turn one of these. Critical to this project is turning a perfect sphere, but I don't want to spend $300 on a sphere jig. So how can we turn a sphere reliably? It is reasonable to figure that the sphere we want is somewhere in the cylinder of wood. A sphere is three-dimensional, but if we slice down through the turning axis, a circle is the two-dimensional slice. Just imagine that we rotate the circle around the axis to get back to the sphere. So why not cut the corners off the cylinder along lines that are still tangent to the sphere? Sorry for the big word. In the actual wood, when we've cut off the corners, we can see that we have an octagon. The target circle is inside this octagon. All we need to do is to cut off the corners at the proper distance. If we put the big cylinder back into the picture, it's all there, an octagon inside the cylinder, and that contains the sphere. But we still need some measures so that we can reliably cut the correct corners. There are multiple ways to determine the measures for key points, drawing and math. Either way, the critical measures are the distance from the top of the cylinder to the first corner, which is 0.293 times the diameter, and the length of each of the 8 sides, which happen to be equal. These are 0.414 times the diameter. I keep these in a note on my phone, and since the phone also has a calculator, that is all that I need. I don't have to be a math whiz. Now, let's do it for real. Previously, I turned this piece of dry cedar into a cylinder, so now I need to turn it into a perfect sphere. When finished to this stage, the sphere needs to be ready to apply final finish. No more refinement allowed. The cylinder can be turned between centers or mounted in a chuck. In my opinion, between centers is easier since I don't have to avoid a chuck with my tools. However, using the chuck gives access to indexing built into the chuck, and the remaining wood can be used as a cup center. Indexing may be useful in some projects, just not this one. My cylinder is 3.78 inches in diameter. Then doing the math, the distance from the top of the cylinder to the first line of the octagon is 1.108 inches, and each side is 1.565 inches. Now I'm measuring and marking the size of a side on the top of the cylinder. I'm not making the other marks until I get a good top end. Then cutting the top down to that diameter, I'll use that as a guide in a later step. I also want to make sure my top is straight and not cupped. Now I can mark the first corner, the midpoint, the bottom corner, and the bottom of the octagon on the side of the cylinder. Since the wood is between centers, I need to waste away the extra wood next to the spindle. But I'm staying away from my bottom line. Then, with a degree of precision, cut the bottom down to a diameter equal to the octagon's side. This is the same as on the top. After all, an octagon has symmetry. Now I have the equivalent of a square, and I need to cut the corners to make an octagon. These are 45-degree cuts, but all I care is to cut from my mark on the side to the spigot corner I cut earlier. Once the cut is complete, I can reduce the spigot further. I target cutting to 1/2 the side size. but it is not critical enough to measure. With that complete, I can divide each side in half and half again. This makes it easy to again cut the corners off to convert the octagon to a hexadecagon, a 16-sided polygon. In summary, we started with a cylinder, turned it to a square, if it were two-dimensional, then to an octagon, then to a hexadecagon. But as soon as the corners are cut, I can also round off the corners to the sphere that was inside the wood all along. It is still a bit rough. Perfection comes next. And then I cut back the spigot more, but not next to the sphere. This gives me enough wood to break off the long spigot without risking it tearing into the good wood of the sphere. Now I've mounted the rough sphere between two cup faceplates. The old equator now runs north and south between the faceplates. Very carefully, with a shear cut, I'm cutting away the ghost image at the top of the sphere. This will also remove the remnants of the mounting spigots. Ideally, I need to leave the equator line intact, but this is rarely the case for this first mount. Finally, mark a new equator line. Again, I rotate the sphere 90 degrees so that the equator line runs north and south. In cutting away the excess wood, I now have bumps at both ends. This mount will remove these bumps, converting them to perfect circles. The shear cut is even more gentle this time. Finish up by marking a new equator line. Again, I rotate the sphere 90 degrees so that the equator line runs north and south. I need to address the new bumps created at the ends and finish removing any defects in the sphere's surface. The shear cut is even more gentle this time. Finish up by marking a new equator line. Again, even more gently. I'm in overtime now. Ideally should only take 3, but I'm rarely ideal. Why not one more time using a skew as a scraper? Now for sanding. I always use a respirator for dust protection and as much vacuum dust collection as I can manage. I always start with my 80 grit gouge. It does a great job at removing any final defects. But just as when I was using the tools, I rotate the sphere's axis 3 times for each grit. With the sphere completely sanded, I'm applying alcohol-based dye for color. A food service glove is sufficient to prevent staining my fingers as I apply the dye with a paper towel. Then let the dye dry completely. Back to a mount between cup centers. It does not matter where I start. I'm cutting a groove at the equator line. The depth is personal preference, whatever I like at the time for the wood that I'm working with. I'm using a spindle gouge, but being very careful to start the cut with the gouge completely closed. Any sanding has to be done now. Then rotate the sphere somewhat. Don't ask me how much. This is all by eye. Then cut another groove just like the first one. This one is a little bit harder due to the interruption from the first cut. Then again, rotate the sphere again. This time I decide to cross both previous cuts at an angle. And you guessed it, cut another groove. This one is again a little harder due to the first 2 cuts. How about another one? This one is harder yet to cut and to find a position where the cup centers will hold the sphere securely. That will be enough for this piece. I'm not sure I could mount it again even if I wanted to, but maybe I could find a way with bigger cup centers. Next time, maybe. To wrap it up, spray it with several coats of rattle-can lacquer, then buff with Tripoli, white diamond, and carnauba wax. I'm not sure what to call this thing, maybe a groovy sphere. What can I use it for? Well, to look at, and to have visitors ask questions about it. It's art, after all. Be sure to go to my website, aswoodturns.com to subscribe to be notified of future live presentations. Please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe on my website, tell your friends, and send me your comments and questions. Every week I make a new woodturning video and add to the over 400 videos to choose from on my website. Please wear your full face shield anytime the lathe is running. Until next week's video, this is Alan Stratton from As Wood Turns.